A very good morning, everyone. Okay, so in the last session, we discussed how to install Python, and then also we understood how to write a hello world program. So I hope my voice is audible. Can you guys confirm in the chat? So today we will see I'm using normal text editor only. So today we'll discuss how to define a variable. So variables in Python. So first thing, what is variable? And then what are the different types of variables available? We'll discuss that. So variables generally we are using to store some data. If you want to store the data, there are different ways we store the data. So one of the way is variable. For example, say, generally 3 ways we use to store the data. The first method here, that is through variables. And the second way, we can store the data using with the file. And then third way, we can store the data using with database. So here if you see, the first way, the data we can store using with variables. And then second way, using with the file. And then third way, using with what? Database. So it can be any database basically. So when you use variable, the variables we use to store the data, it can be any data, but generally it's a less secure. So it's a less secured, but the data I can store here. So means we can assign the variable, the value to the variable, example a equal to 10. Like that. Example here, a equal to 10. This is the example. So we are assigning a value to the variable. The data we are storing, and it is not secured as well as it's not permanent. So not secured, also not permanent, right? The second one is file. So here, whatever I am storing the data, whatever I am writing here in a normal text file, day3 underscore notes. So this text file is a file which I am storing the data. Variables in Python, there is the data. So this data is actually permanent, but again here also no secured. So the data when you write in a file, it says permanent but no secured. But we do have a database. For example, MySQL is a database, Oracle is a database, Sybase is a database, MongoDB, MariaDB. There are different databases. So when we use this database, the data is permanent and then also it's secure. So whenever if you are learning any language, any programming language or any scripting language, either Java or C or C++, Python, whatever language, we must aware of it, how to work with the variables using with that particular language. Since we are using Python, we must need to know how to use variables using with Python, how to read file or how to write data to the file with Python, how to read data from the database or creating the data in database. These three important. So I hope it is clear now. Variables, file, and database. Variables, not secure, not permanent, just we store the data. File, it's a permanent but no secured. Database, it's a permanent as well as secure. So in this now, in the basic level, first we will discuss variables, intermediate level file handling, advanced level working with database. This is how it will be. Okay, let's try to focus on variables now. So what is variable? Variable we are using to store the data. Okay, so simply the variables we are using to store the data. But what type of data? See, in programming languages, when you define any variable, the data type is must. Because it's in programming languages, static data type we call it as. So which means whenever if you want to define some variable, something like this, int a and then a equal to 10, or something float b equal to something 2.5. So the data type we provide in the programming languages, if you write integer value here and then the value we define integer. So this is called static data type. So the data type we are defining and then assigning to the variable the specific value. So variables we are using to store the data, but here in Python, the data can be any data type. So which means what? It can be integer value, or it can be a float value, or it can be a string value, or it can be any different values like Boolean values, whatever it is. Okay. Now, when you define any variable, it's a dynamic data type here. So what is dynamic data type? You don't need to define the variable data type like as we just discussed how we define in programming language. So in Python, you can directly write a equal to 10. You don't need to write int a equal to 10. You can directly write something b equal to 2.4. Something you can write directly c equal to Python. D equal to true. It's a Boolean value, capital T. Okay. So the variables you can define directly variable name equal to value. So this is the reason it is very easy here for the programmer. Why Python is very much famous for the platform, like any specific platform related automation, especially administration related automation. Let's take example, let's say Linux administrator. So the Linux administrator, as an administrator, he's already doing something administration related work. Maybe assume that installing some patches on 100 servers, or maybe something like, he's trying to execute some commands based on the requirements. So here, as an administrator, is doing something, either installation or something like, monitoring something like that, or maybe some running some commands. But again, if you go and ask the same administrator, write a program to do this. So which means doing something, assume, okay, there is a package installation, some installation he is doing, okay. Manually installation is doing installation. But the same installation, if you ask the same administrator, write a program instead of doing this manually, write a program to automate this manual task. So now the programming languages are difficult here to automate this. There are two reasons. One, maybe the administrator again should reach to the programmer for the help to write this type of code. So means that administrator again need to provide what steps need to do these all things. And also the programming language is somehow difficult to write for the automation. So the programming language is very much popular for web development, enterprise application development, because more security required, more reusability required, scalable required. But for automation, it's not required that much. It should be easy and then should handle, simple way. So that's the reason here the programming languages failed for this automation. But in the place of programming languages, scripting languages, it actually more succeeded here. So which means the scripting languages, for example, we have a shell script. To automate Linux administration, shell script is very easiest language. And then it's more efficient, like, if you write the commands in a file and then if you execute, it works. You don't need to write something hash include stdio.h, or maybe if you write something Java class and then the class name, you don't need these all things. Why that is required? Just to execute those commands. So now how the shell script is working, or how the other scripting languages are working, similar way Python also it introduced to automate any particular platform. So Python says that, okay, if you want to execute these commands, just write this in a file, all the commands in one single shot and then execute. It works. But that will not work with programming language. So that is the reason, simply, Python is very much famous for automation, especially the platform related automation. It is simple, and then also there are a lot of modules support. And second thing, as an administrator itself, he can write the code because it's easy. So nowadays, if you see, Python is very, very much famous for AI automation. So AI automation, if you check, so AI automation, there are like, we have ML ops for DevOps people, like AI ops, everywhere Python is there. Python involved everywhere. Because Python is easy, first thing, and then second thing, lot of module support. So if you work with real time, like, the platform related applications, you'll get idea everywhere Python it involved. So now if you see here itself, very simple way, the variables itself, if you see, we are just defining variable name equal to value. We're not actually using any data type here. But if you observe what are the different types of variables available here. So types of variables. So simply we have a different types, like we simply call it as a basic data type and collection data types. So basic data type means it comes under this, like, how to define a numbers like integer and float values. And then how to define a Boolean values. And then how to define a string values. This all it comes under basics. And we have a collection type, like collections are, we simply call it as a data structures in programming language. So collections means like more than one value we use to store in a variable. So that is a list here we have, and tuple we have, and dictionary, and set. So this is very simple Python. If you know this all, then storing the data using with variable, it's very clear, very easy. So as we know, just we are defining like this, but this is our basic type now. So integer value, how to define, we know the float value, string value, and Boolean value. That's it. Collections means like more than one value. We'll see that. Okay, so how to define variables and what are the different types of variables available we discussed. Now let's see practical example how to define these variables and how to print this. So since we define already some variables, I'm just copying as it is now. And then let me write a script file. So save as, I'm just writing here day3 underscore script dot py. So in the last session we discussed .py extension is mandatory for Python program, and then save as type. The save as type should be all types here. I'm following the same now. So save as type should be all types. And then save. So I just defined some variables, a equal to 10, b equal to 2.4, c equal to Python, d equal to true. So these are the variables I defined. I want to print this. So if you observe last session, hello world program we executed, print is a function. So print is a built-in function in Python. You can directly use print A, print B, print C, and print D. So I'm trying to print these variable values where we created this script here under May folder and then Python. In my system, I created like this. And then in the command prompt, go to that same path and then execute using with Python and then script name here, day3 underscore script. I can see the output here, 10, 2.5, sorry, 2.4 Python and true. Now the question here is, how Python understands this print function? Because in C language, what we observed, every time we use hash include stdio.h. When you write hash include stdio.h, then only the C compiler is understanding printf, because this printf function is available in that library, that header file stdio.h, input output header file. But here we are not writing any libraries, we are not writing any header files, but how this print is working. So this is the one here need to understand. Python, whenever if you write any Python code, when you execute the code, automatically, internally, it will import one library. So we are not writing that library name. We are just writing variable name equal to value and then trying to print that. So print is a function, which is a built-in function. So how Python is understanding that print function? When you execute this Python code internally, it will import one module, that module name called built-in. See now, I'm going to the interactive mode. This is called interactive mode. Interactive mode means you can directly interact with Python interpreter. You don't need to write the code in text file and then execute, not required. You can simply, let's say, for example, a equal to 10. I want to print this variable value a. It is possible. So one-time executions, or if you want to verify something, the model or library exists or not, you can directly go to here using with just Python, and then this is interactive mode. You can verify and then you can come out. Only one time I want to validate or verify. So if you check here, there is a library called built-ins. You can check with the dir. So dir is not a DOS command now. Since I'm in Python interactive mode, there is a Python function. But the same command, let's say if you are coming out using with Control Z, and then if you run dir, there is a DOS command. So where you are executing command is more important. I'm executing here in the DOS prompt here. There is a operating system command, and then it will give you all the files and directories. But the same command, if you go to the interactive mode, and then if you're trying to run like this is a Python function. Now, if you run like this dir, it will not understand that files and directories. It is saying this is a built-in function in Python. So where you are running the command, I'm running inside the Python interactive mode. So I want to check dir of what? Dir of underscore underscore r. Okay, underscore underscore built-ins underscore underscore. So this is the built-in module or library. Whenever if you execute Python code internally, it imports all the times this library. And in this library, you can see, if you just check here from this, okay, only this part concentrate. Whenever if you execute Python code, immediately internally this library, it will import. And then it will check whether this particular function available or not in this library. So if you observe here somewhere, print is there. So means what? As a programmer, we are not doing this all the things. Our job is simple. We define a variable and then trying to print that variable value. But Python internally, it imported this module or library. And in that library, it verified whether this name is exist or not. It is exist. If it is exist, what is the behavior of that function? So print is a function to display something. What you want to display? I want to display this variable value. So that's the reason it is working. Now see this, for example. See here, I'm trying to define something a equal to 10. And there is another function called, see, there is another function called type. So what is this type here? Type is a built-in function. It will give you what is the type of this variable. See, it is giving its integer type. We know print, it is trying to print this value. But other than this, if I write something, it is giving a name error. Why it is giving name error? As we discussed, whenever if you try to run these functions, immediately it is verifying from here. And then in this built-in functions, SFSD not available. So name error we got. So this is how the Python internally it works, right? Okay, so we observed where is this, the built-in functions defined. So built-in functions available in the built-ins. So dir of underscore built-ins we used. What it contains, all the built-in functions. It contains, okay. Now, we define a variable and then we displayed that variable values. And data type not defined here, it's a dynamic data type. At the time of execution, the variable, it initializes the data type. So this part we will discuss maybe in 2 sessions. I don't want to confuse today itself. Python, everything, it's object based. So what is that object base? How it creates objects, how internally it behaves when you create a variable, how it creates the data types, everything will understand the internally what it will, what it is actually doing. But there is not the time to understand that. We just only focus on how to define a variable and how to display the value. After that, we also discussed that how to check the data type, right? So type is a built-in function. So type of A, what is the type of this variable? What is the type of this variable name B? What is the type of this data type? What is the type of D? So let me print some output separation here, something like this I'm trying to print, and then after that I'm checking this type. See the output here. First it printed the variable values and then it printed the data types. So 10 is integer value, 2.4 is a float value. There is no concept of in Python double, short, long, this all. Just float. Whatever the type, whatever the values you define like with point value, it's like a float. Whatever you write between a single or double quotes, it's just string. That's it, str. So I define Python between a single quote, that is a string. And true, it's a Boolean value, capital T. I'm not writing, say this true. I define just capital T and then R, U, E. It's not between the quotes. If you write between the quotes, then the data type will be different. If you write that between the quotes, it will be a string. But here it is a Boolean value. Because true, right? Capital T, then R, U, E. So in Python, true false is something like this. True, then directly false. It's not 1, 0 basically. So that is a Boolean value, right? Okay, now how to comments? Like whenever if you want to write documentation, comments are more important. So I'll understand that the documentation part in the coming sessions. So when you develop your own library, or if you write your own, program, sometimes we have to explain that what that function is doing, why that function we actually writing here in the script, or maybe Whenever if you want to write something, you need to write that, okay, what is the purpose of this script? So why this script is actually writing, right? Maybe adding two numbers, or maybe connecting 1,000 servers and then deleting, or removing one specific file. That is the purpose. Or connecting 1,000 servers and installing some security patch on 1,000 servers. So that is the purpose of the script. So what is the purpose of the script we are actually using? So that is purpose, right? That we write in a comment. So comments here we are using for documentation purpose. Comments in Python. There are two types of comments we have. One is a single line comment. That is pound symbol. Just we write hash prompt. And we have a multi-line comments. So multi-line comments, we use just 3 double quotes like this. And then what you want to write here, comments, and then just ends with 3 double quotes. So just now I told like, what is the purpose? You can write like this, purpose. Which version of Python it used, or which version of script it is, when it started, when it ended, who is the actually author of this script, everything you can write here. So the purpose may be this is a basic hello world program. I want to write something like this. This is how we write everything in the comment. Similar way, multi-line comments. Let's say if I have something, so I have a 10 lines of code. I want to comment only third line. So when you execute this code now, it will execute only 1 to 10 except 3. 1 to 10 except 3. But I want to comment this third line to 7th line. So when I execute again, it will execute only 1, 2, and then 8, 9, 10, the remaining all commented. See now, for example, here, I want to comment these all the lines now. So just use this multi-line comment. So when I execute the code, it will not execute this now. So all the lines comment. Okay, now I'm going to define something variable like this, name. Or student name. See, student name. So this is important, try to understand here. When I define a variable, student underscore name I used. So in every language, when you create a variable, there are some naming conventions we have. So the naming conventions, it explains that, okay, how you define a variable, what is the rule, what are the rules available? Can I use the variable name directly with a digit, or can I use the variable name using with only lowercase or uppercase or combination? And there are some different cases. We have a Pascal case, we have a camel case, we have a snake case. So what is that snake case, Pascal case means? So this is actually now snake case underscore. If you are using that is a snake case. So Python always best practice, we go with snake cases. Student name. So the same student name, when you define this student name, let's say if it is a Pascal case, camel case, snake case, how we write. So if it is a Pascal case, capital S, capital N. This is called student name. Like this, we write the variable. For example, assume Siri. So the variable name, if you see, capital S, capital N. Camel case, if you write, it starts with lowercase, but here it is a capital letter. Like a camel, capital letter. Snake case, if you see, student underscore name equal to, sorry. So in Python, we follow this for the best practice, but don't think that this is not possible. It is also possible. Any way you can write it, either Pascal or camel or snake. But generally, the best practice in Python, we always follow this. Because most of the times, if you observe, like, even the deployments, wherever, like, even if you are working with cloud and all, everywhere we can see the data. If somewhere defined in a variable, it will be like this underscores. So Python best practice, we use this, but it also works, but that is not best practices. So how we can actually confirm that this is the best practice, this is the only rule need to follow? In the last session, we discussed there is a community, right? So python.org. There is official community for Python. In this, you can see there is a documentation. In the documentation, there is a PEP index. What is that? PEP index. So the PEP means Python enhancement proposals. So when you write a Python code in real time, we actually follow these guidelines. Is it a mandatory means? Of course, no, but the best practices. Now, if you go and check here, what is these rules? Style guide for Python code. And then we are actually discussing about variables. You can go and see somewhere about these variables, naming convention, we can see. Comments just now we discussed, okay. Yeah, naming conventions. So the naming conventions like in Python library are a bit of mess. Of course, the reason I just told, like you can use any Pascal, camel, whatever, but the main important is something like underscore, right? So you can see this actually naming styles here. You can define a variables like this, like single lowercase letter, single uppercase letter, okay. Lowercase or lowercase with underscore. See, uppercase or uppercase with underscore. This is generally best practice, but also okay capitalized words like as just discussed camel case thing. Now you can see the so named because of bumpy look for its letters. So when you use acronym in cap word, capitalize all the letters of acronym. Thus, HTTP server error is better than HTTP server error. So it is giving the explanation here. And also you can see the mixed case, something like this. This is called, actually, this is called camel case, but this is actually what Pascal case. You can search somewhere like in Google, you'll get idea. But generally the best practice always focus on this lowercase with underscores. But anyway, this is how we actually define the naming convention in Python. So this is there in the PEP guidelines. Is from here actually we go. And just now we discussed this, right? Multi-line comment. So whatever here I'm teaching, it's not just like, thinking on my own. Everything somewhere actually it is there, like, the real time, how we write the code, what rules we follow. Okay. So this is the one actually now, the PEP guidelines. So from here only, we have to follow this when you define the variable. So this is how we write. So we already used variable name equal to value. Now I'm just going with something like variable declaration, some advanced level. Okay, why this? Something instead of directly writing student name, student underscore name is easy. And then also see it is very clear. It is differentiating the student name. Okay, let me write here Siri. I hope it is clear now, the naming convention. And then I'm trying to print student name. So what I want to do now, I don't want to just print student name as it is. I want to print hi Siri, welcome. What I want to print? I want to print hi Siri, welcome. So there are different ways you can write now. So if you want to write student name, which is a variable, the variable name always without quotes in Python. You cannot write like this, student name. Python simply treats this as a string. See, the first one, okay, value it printed, but the second one, variable name it is printed. You cannot use single quote. It prints as it is like a string. So there is no difference between single and double quotes in Python. Both it treats like a string. Remember that. Then how? So the solution here is, the first one, let's say, for example, I want to print like this, hi, and then comma separator, variable name, we write student name, and then comma separator, welcome. So whenever if you write some string, that string we are writing between a quote and then variable name without quote and then welcome. So this is with comma separation. Or you can use plus also instead of comma. This is a concatenation. Strings we can concatenate using with plus symbol. There is a string concatenation. So both outputs you can see here. The first one is hi Siri welcome. Second one without space hi Siri welcome, because of plus it is concatenating. The best way to write not these two, you can write, but it is okay. But the best way is we actually use in Python 3 point versions. Anyway, of course, everyone using Python 3 point versions only. 2 point versions, it's outdated, no support from Python communities. So you don't need to know what is 2 point versions now. It's outdated concept. But Python 3 point versions, it's actually their F string concept. It is a format string. So how we can write this beautifully? See, you just write F and then quotes, hi. Variable names we write between a curly brackets, and then remaining text you write as it is. Only the variable name we define between a curly bracket. Starts with F and then hi, variable name, welcome. Here we go. Now we can see this. Hi, Siri, welcome. So two things here. This is actually traditional one. This is a traditional. This is a professional. So everywhere we write this way, not this way. It's a old style and there is a latest style. So I hope it is clear now how to define variable. We understood how to print, how to display the value. What are the different types of variables? We will discuss that again in detail. And then naming conventions in Python. Also, we understood the importance of PEP guidelines. We follow this always, right? Style guide for Python. We are following this action. And then we understood what is snake case, camel case, something Pascal case, these all things. And how to check what is the type of variable with the type built-in function, and then how to get a variable value with some combination of text. It is clear. Okay. Any questions here now, anyone? It's open for questions. Let me stop this recording here and open for questions, and also will create some breakout room now. So breakout room can discuss what we discussed today and even in the last session.